Susan Delacourt is a columnist with the Toronto Star. Joël-Denis Bellavance is the parliamentary bureau chief for Presse. And John Ivison is a columnist with the National Post and parliamentary bureau chief for Postmedia. It's good to see you all again. Susan, let me start with you. Conservatives are crowing about the hundreds of thousands of memberships they've sold for the leadership race. Looks like the Poilievre camp alone saying it sold more than 300,000 memberships. What do you see in those membership numbers?
Oh, I see a lot in this. I actually wrote about this for today because I'm fascinated with it. We have had good news for democracy in these things. It's always good. If people are spending $15 out of their pockets to join a political party and participate in democracy, that is good news. No question. This is a few days after we heard that in Ontario, they couldn't get more than 4 in 10 people to cast a ballot. So I'm a little perplexed about about the difference between the two. We've talked about this on the show, I think, too, that the difference between the world of difference between the Ontario election and this Conservative leadership race. Right. It's like they are functioning and they continue to function in two separate universes. Mr. Poilievre on paper right now has a huge advantage. There is the issue of points being allocated by riding and geography. It's not as simple as, the most votes wins. But it is a strong statement that there is something motivating people to sign up and vote for the Conservative Party in a way that did not motivate people to vote last week in the Ontario provincial election. Right. I find that the difference fascinating.
Joël-Denis, what do you think of these membership sales? Tell us about the race. Patrick Brown put out his numbers. He says they sold 150. Pierre Poilievre more than 300,000. Jean Charest in Quebec says he did really well, but isn't drilling down too much on the numbers. So what do you see here?
Well, clearly, if Pierre Poilievre sold that many membership cards, he's got a huge advantage over his opponents. But that will depend on where those members are. If there are geographically located in one region, it's not going to be enough to win because you need to be spread around in 338 ridings because each riding gets 100 points. So it's a preferential ballot. So the numbers are, very impressive. But where are they located? That remains to be seen, and we'll find out in a few weeks where those memberships are. Right.
It could be. I early in the program spoke with the president of the party who says it could be closer to the end of July before we actually get a breakdown on exactly how many members how many members actually signed up. That number's around 600,000 we hear, but that'll have to be confirmed. John, what do you see here?
I think Pierre Poilievre may have it in the bag. I've been speaking to a bunch of senior Conservatives who are not aligned with the Poilievre campaign, but who have been through this exercise many times before. And, not only does he have 300,000 claimed members, there are 142,000 existing members, and you've got to imagine that he's got the lion's share of those. So something is happening here. I know that there are likely to be wrangling over the finer counts. This is not an accurate count, 311,000. Each candidate is going to get the preliminary list and is going to be able to challenge the members that the other candidates are claiming. That is going to wheedle away at some of them. But you can't go from 300,000 to 150 very easily. I mean, I think that, it looks like at this stage, to me and to the people I'm talking to, a first ballot Poilievre win, unless his rivals can convince people over the summer who have already signed up to be members for Poilievre that he cannot win a general election and therefore they should defect.
Yeah, and how, what's the challenge involved in that, Susan? I mean, we've talked about this before on our program, that it's all about, leadership races are all about who can sell the most memberships because, and then convert those memberships into support. But how big of a challenge is it if Pierre Poilievre's got the lion's share of memberships here for those other candidates to try and, in the next 2 or 3 months, try and win those people over to their side?
Well, motivation is going to be a huge factor, especially during the summer months. People don't tend to be on the edge of their seats thinking about politics in the summer months. So that's going to be one factor. I was talking to somebody today, though, who was saying Charest, as going back as far as 1993, has some experience with pulling people away. He managed to pull a lot of support away from Kim Campbell in the 1993 leadership race. Not enough to win, but he is working on that. And I looked at the Poilievre camp supplied reporters with some regional breakdowns themselves. And again, right, as Joël-Denis and John have been saying, these all have to be verified. But it does look like the majority of Mr. Poilievre's support is in Ontario. I think almost half of it is in Ontario. Put with Alberta, that's well over half. So Mr. Poilievre has to work on getting the other ridings out. Apparently more than 50 ridings in Ontario. He's got more than 1,000 votes. But for all of them all summer, what they have to do is keep this base motivated. And again, not to harp on this, but I was really struck by that Ontario turnout number last week and thinking what a difficult task it is right now to get people interested in politics, unless it is to be, unless it's to knock the system down.
John, let me turn to you. I want to ask you about Canada's Chief Justice, Richard Wagner, out on the weekend in an interview with Radio Canada, warning against political attacks on the Supreme Court and judicial independence. How exceptional is that kind of a move from the Chief Justice, and what do you think of the timing?
Well, it's probably not entirely unrelated to the Conservative leadership, where I think 3 of the candidates came out and said that they would use the notwithstanding clause in the recent judgment on parole for multiple murderers. Unprecedented for political candidates to do that. I mean, Stephen Harper had his problems with the Supreme Court, but he never used notwithstanding. So I think there is an element of it being specific to that. But, Wagner has been out before talking about these things. It's not like this is the first time that he's talking about reaching out to Canadians to explain how it works.
Joël-Denis, part of this outreach program the court's involved in involves taking hearings on the road. It's done that. It's going to be doing that in Quebec later this year, right at a time when the province is dealing with legislation around identity and around language, and they'll be taking questions from the public at their stop in Quebec City. Could that be risky?
Absolutely, because we know there will be provincial elections, and Bill 21 and Bill 96 will be very much part of the election campaign here in Quebec. So I wouldn't be surprised if some questions are put to the Chief Justice about those issues and where the Supreme Court might go. So he might get drawn into a political debate while the province is going to the polls. But the warning from Chief Justice Wagner is interesting. I would argue that he probably had one person in mind when he made that comment. Maybe Pierre Poilievre, because he's been attacking the Bank of Canada, and maybe the Chief Justice fears that the Supreme Court of Canada might be next on his line in the mind of Pierre Poilievre. So I guess it's a preemptive warning on the part of the Chief Justice that he will probably repeat this week, because he will be in Montreal to participate in a Q&A session at a Corim. It's an institute in Quebec, and he will be carrying that message through in Montreal this week as well.
Susan, what are your thoughts on this, if I can put it this way, a bit of a public relations sortie by the Chief Justice in defense of the High Court?
Oh, well, let's not forget where he was when he was talking, because he had been down in the United States when the Supreme Court leak came out on Roe versus Wade, and the emerging idea there that the courts should somehow reflect public will or the popular or populist thought rather than be a check against it. As John said, it's not the first time in Canada we've seen challenges to the Supreme Court. Stephen Harper, it was called judicial activism, and it's because of the Charter of Rights here. We've seen Ian Brodie, who was Mr. Harper's first chief of staff, actually was an academic who wrote a lot about judicial activism. So it's not a new discussion in Canada, but because of what we're seeing happening in the United States, it's an important discussion here too, because there are a lot of ways in which streams of thought from the United States have made their way, especially into, as my co-panelists said, into conservative thought right now.
All right. want to thank you all for your time tonight. Time's short, but thanks to all of you for joining me, and we'll talk again soon. Take care, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, Peter.